All right, everybody kind of look to see if you're getting the feed yet.
It's not looking good. It says we're live. Hello, are we live? Ask our people.
Yep. Got it?
You got one confirmed? Two? All right, take it away.
Video has ended. Mine's working.
We got 2 viewers. Come on, we need more viewers. 3 viewers. Come on, we want more. We got to have 5 before we'll start. Come on, 2 more. 2 more people.
5 viewers in the 5. You're going to get 6.
And we got 6. Let's go.
Live from Jenna's Lounge in the shadow of the Wisconsin State Capitol, it's WISI on Tap with your host, Steve Walters.
And it's Friday and this tie just isn't working. Welcome to WISI on Tap. On this afternoon's program and hopefully future programs, if this one works, we'll discuss what happens at the Capitol and how it affects all of you. But this isn't a one-way show. I need you to make this show work. Please post your comments and questions, and I'll respond the best way I can. I'm here to answer your questions, chat with a guest or two, and help you understand the issues facing our state. And remember, your tax dollars are often part of the solutions to the problems in the great state of Wisconsin. So I'm here to share options the state legislature is proposing, learn who the players are, and maybe even persuade you to become more involved in your state government. Please join me in a drink. I'm having a brandy. My colleagues are having a beer.
Yeehaw!
And they'll be chiming in with questions that you post. Let's kick it.
Yeah.
Oh, Craig Thompson, Executive Director.
Hey, Steve.
Transportation Development
yeah.
Association. Hey, man, you need a beer to participate.
I do need a beer. That would be
Because
great.
it's Friday agendas.
Thank you.
All things are better.
Sit a little closer, gentlemen. Get to know each other. You're friends. Cheers.
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 Salute. You've been working 2 years on transportation funding.
Yep.
Give us the short over a beer version. What's the problem?
Well, there's two problems. One is that the roads themselves are getting in really bad shape, and people are noticing it, and they're upset and they want something done. And the other problem is the shape of the fund. We're pretty far underwater, and so those are the 2 things coming together right now that they're struggling with.
That beautiful building up ahead, that Capitol?
Yes.
Why can't they fix it?
Well, there's differences of opinion on I think the vast majority of the people over there think we need to do something, on both parties. But the governor said he's not willing to raise the gas tax or registration fee, which is generally those are the 2 user fees that go into a separate fund. And so his own party's kind of disagreeing with him about that in the assembly, and he's introduced his budget. Now it's going to be their turn. So
He said in the State of the State in the budget message, it's not time to raise the gas tax.
Yep.
Does that kind of doom all your efforts of the TDA and all these other organizations?
Well, I saw the speaker, Robin Voss, talking to a group, and he pointed out we're co-equal branches of government. He's introduced a budget. They agree with a lot of it, but they're going to make changes to quite a bit too, and they said transportation is clearly going to be one of them. So I think we got a long way to go.
You know what intrigues me? When you made a presentation of Wisconsin counties, you said Wisconsin is the second most transportation-dependent state in the nation. That surprised me. Why is that?
Well, it's basically because we're so dependent on manufacturing, which is unbelievably transportation dependent, agriculture, obviously transportation dependent, and tourism. So those 3 industries make up the majority of our economy, and they're transportation intensive. In Indiana, it's the most transportation dependent.
We spend about $3 billion a year. We get $2 billion of that from the gas tax, 30.9 cents, and the vehicle registration fee.
Right.
And then we get about $750 from the feds, and we bond for the rest.
Yep.
What's TDA's position on the best way to raise those revenues?
Well, we've tried to leave this a little bit open-ended because in the end, the elected people are going to have to come together and coalesce around their solution. But we do believe that using user fees makes the most sense. Not going into the general fund. That's needed for UW, for K-12, for Medicaid, all those things. As you remember, there was a question on the ballot a couple of years ago to constitutionally segregate the user fees. 80% of the people voted yes on that. I mean, that's 80%. So those 2 user fees are registration fee, gas tax. We think somewhere in there they need to look at adjusting one or both.
Well, you don't get the people in that capital to act until you get critical mass and their constituents believing that they're a problem.
Right.
Are their constituents saying there's a problem?
There's no doubt about that. Almost every legislator I talk to, they say when they did doors during an election, when they're going back, this is an issue they're hearing about. Howard Markline, senator from Southwest Part, he did a survey of his district, and the vast majority came back. I think it was like 322 of the 411 that answered said transportation fixing the roads is number one problem that they want to see done.
Hey, we got a question from the.
Question.
When are they going to finish I-94?
Hey.
That's a great question. That was a question that was asked when Secretary Gottlieb, when he was still secretary, testified at the hearing. And the question was, if this budget that is being considered would pass, how long before 94, the interstate system basically in Southeast would be done? And he said, with this new, if this would become the base, it would take 70 years to get the interstates in Southeast done.
If there's no additional revenues.
Yep.
But when you answer and talk about 94, are you talking about 94 from Milwaukee through Racine? Or are you talking about the east-west from the zoo?
I was talking about all of that.
All of
70
that.
years for all of that. So the east-west is no longer in any schedule at all. It hasn't even been enumerated. So,
Which was just announced this
yeah.
week. By
And
the
when we say
governor.
east-west, that's that little stretch right in front of Miller Park. So
Yeah.
it's we rebuilt the Marquette, and that's been done. And we're in the process of getting the zoo interchange done, which is massive, but it's going to be done soon. But then at this point, we're going to leave the little stretch in between the two not done. So we will have spent billions and not improved the traffic flow through that corridor at all.
Okay, go back to her question. When is 94 going to be done?
We don't know.
And why did Secretary Gottlieb resign?
You'd have to ask him for that specifically, but I think he decided it was time. I don't want to answer on his behalf.
Well, a follow-up question to that is the audit showed that the cost of projects have been underestimated by half, some of these majors, which worsens the problem. But you said at the counties that if you read the fine print, the Transportation Planning Commission had been told that. So it wasn't a surprise to you, but it certainly was a surprise to all the people in that marble
I have to
palace.
admit, when I saw some of the reactions, it reminded me a little bit of, was that in Casablanca? I'm shocked, there's gambling going on in this casino. When they submitted those, first of all, the estimates on the majors is done even before there's an environmental study. So it is kind of a dart at a dartboard at that point in time. But they said, we are not accounting for inflation. And they submitted that to the Transportation Projects Commission, which is chaired by the governor, 5 assembly people, 5 senate people. So, after 18 years, for everybody to be so flummoxed that the number changed from then it's a little hard to understand.
But it changes the realities in terms of what's going to get done in the next 2 years.
And it changes, everybody was talking about how big the problem was, and again, I heard Speaker Voss say the other day, it's probably closer to a $2 billion problem now than a $1 billion problem when you look at the changing cost of those projects.
How are you going to pay for that? I mean, how do you make up $2 billion?
You're not gonna at all at once. I mean, there's no way. But I mean, we can't just be paralyzed and say we can't do it all at once and we're gonna do nothing. I mean, that would be you've got to start. States all around the country, I mean, all of our neighbors who have much better roads than we do. Michigan just increased theirs. Iowa increased theirs. Indiana's in the process of looking at increasing theirs significantly. So, sooner or later, you got to decide how much we're willing to bite off and chew and start moving forward on.
So we're in worse shape than all the states around us?
It's actually not even close. In that audit, they showed it's called the International Roughness Index. They measure the smoothness of the road with lasers, and it's the only one. There's a special vehicle and it goes over the road.
Really?
And it's the only thing that you can compare states on. That's only data. And we've got 32% of our roads in good condition. The next closest to us is Iowa with 55%. And Ohio and Indiana are at like 75% good condition.
So what are they doing that we're not doing?
They're putting money into their roads.
What are the chances of Wisconsin using toll roads?
That continues to be talked about. Right now, you couldn't toll the existing interstate lanes because the feds won't allow it. You could toll it if you added one, but there's a new regime in Washington, and President Trump's talked a lot about public-private partnerships, so that could change. But it's not an answer that's going to come up in the next 2 years, but it could eventually.
Well, you mentioned President Trump. He's been talking about a $1 trillion infrastructure package. Is there any chance the feds are going to come and help us with our problem?
Sure hope so, because when you ask how are we ever going to get there, some federal investment could help on some part of it. That $1 trillion is a little bit misunderstood, though. It's about $130 billion, I believe, about $130 billion of actual new investment that's supposed to leverage a bunch of private, tax incentives and things to get to the trillion. So, there was some people that testified in the Senate this last week that those public-private partnerships tend to work better in large urban populations and not as much in, because you got to be able to get your money back out of it. And so it's usually in very heavily traveled corridors when you talk about roads.
Well, a follow-up to the question on when I-94 is going to be done. One of the projects that the governor is keeping on track is 3990 between Madison and Illinois.
Kind of.
Explain.
Well, it's on track, but in order to be on track, they changed the scope of it. So now the belt line up here was the last leg of that. They've said that's not part of the project anymore.
It isn't. But when is the question is, what's the earliest widening 3990 from Madison to Illinois could get done?
I believe 2022.
2022. Okay. Now, the belt line is not scheduled.
Nope.
But Verona Road is scheduled.
What the governor proposed does get Verona Road back on. Well, it got delayed last year 1 year, but it would have gotten delayed 2 more years if he would have stuck with the DOT budget. He got it back on the new schedule that it should be done in, I think, 2021 if it survives this process.
Now, you and I have been working in the Capitol in and around it for a few years.
Yep.
You remember the time when transportation was a bipartisan issue?
Yep.
Democrats right now say, Republicans, you've really screwed it up. So, is there any hope that a solution could be a bipartisan?
I think there's that chance. I know Senator Schilling has said that she'd be willing to in the past. Peter Barca has said that he'd be willing to. Where it gets tough is if it's part of the overall budget. I don't know how many Democrats, even if they support the transportation part, are going to vote for the rest of the priorities in the budget. And the Speaker and the Majority Leader said they're not interested in splitting it out of the budget. So that's kind of where you're going to be your conundrum.
Okay, one other question. Our gas tax now, 30.9 cents a gallon, hasn't been raised since 2006. If it went up 10 cents, what would it cost the average driver?
About $56 a year.
$56 a
So
year.
about $5 a month, a little less. Yeah.
And
I'd
you-
pay that.
I would too.
Well, okay.
So what's the argument against it?
That it's raising taxes. Right? I mean,
Well, some other states don't hit you with a flat $75 fee like Wisconsin. They value according to
Right.
the age of the vehicle, cost of the vehicle.
Right.
What other factors?
sometimes weight, but it's usually it's usually value based. Is basically what they're doing. Which is why if you look at Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan, all the ones around us, the reason that they pay more in user fees is because of that. Their gas tax is about the same as ours, or some a couple cents less than ours. But what they pay in their registration fees is way more than what we pay.
Okay.
So that's where they really pay their money.
Now, as a veteran of the Capitol, you've worked a lot of major issues. How is this one different from some of the other tough nuts you've tried to crack?
I'd say that the 2 things that are probably the most different about this than what I've seen before is the disagreement among the majority party and their governor on the issue, 1, and 2, just the level of public involvement in it. I mean, people, everywhere I go, people are engaged in this issue, they feel it, they see it every day, and they're frustrated it's one of the most basic things government's supposed to be able to do, and they're like, why can't we just fix our roads?
It is a common denominator issue. We all know the condition of the roads. Well, somebody out there watching this, if they really feel strongly that we ought to,
Just
as
fix
your
it.
button said, just fix it,
Yeah.
what should they do?
They should contact their legislators and the governor and let them know. I would say of the 132 legislators out there, the vast majority agree that we need to raise some revenue and do it. So it's not even necessarily pressuring them, it's letting them know that they've got support back home to do what needs to be done, and they may need to hold up a budget in order to do it.
Let's think outside the box.
Okay.
Doesn't Illinois charge a sales tax on its gasoline? Or some states do.
There's several states that do. Indiana does, but it doesn't go, there's a sales tax on their gas, but it doesn't go into the transportation fund. It's just a sales tax, goes into the, part of what they're looking at doing is they're looking at increasing their gas tax a dime, and the sales tax that's already charged on their gas, they want to put that now into their transportation fund.
Another proposal that you and I have heard, let's take all the sales tax paid on automotive parts and stuff and divert it to the transportation fund. That's a non-starter in that building, isn't it?
Well, the governor had supported that, proposed it actually in the past. They had looked at it, but it doesn't seem to be on the table as much. Again, if you do that, you are taking revenue that had formerly been going into the general fund to fund, again, K-12, UW, and all those sorts of things. So now you are starting to move money around if you do this.
I'm going to go back to the polling issue.
Yep.
Speaker Boss has said we are 3 or 4 years away. That's the bad news. The good news, though, is wasn't there a study that said if we get to tolling, it could be worth billions a year, or singular or plural?
It could be, but the other thing that the Speaker Voss brought up, and he was at the county's group talking to him, that he wanted to be clear about, and I don't think most people get their head around this. A lot of people say they just want to put up a toll booth at the Illinois line and at the Minnesota line. He said in order to do that, you got to toll the whole interstate. So
Which
that
would take a change in federal law.
yes, but I mean, but if you're gonna, it'd have to be the whole thing.
Hey, what's
What's going on here?
I don't know.
Raise a mug and find your ties a t-shirt, a couple more oversized buttons won't hurt. Grab some mittens, a coaster, some magnets, or pile on stuff from the swag wagon.
Craig, you've been swagged out as a remuneration. You need a hat for participating in the first WISI on Tap, and wear it in good health. And thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Thanks.
From Jenna's WISI on Tap.
There's that crazy building.